Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this video is going to be on Advanced Express. So this is not going to go over the basics of writing. I'll kind of recap some of those bits along the way, but really this is about some of the more advanced tools that you may not use super regularly up till now if you've been playing with Express. And specifically routing. So this is going to be more of an advanced routing video. So first, let's just set up an Express project and just kind of do a quick review of just sort of what I'm assuming you know by now. Okay, so again, if I make a new folder, we'll just call this, advanced routing. So I would just open up that folder. Let me just open this folder up in terminal. Okay, and then basic what I would do is I would do a npm init-y to create a new npm project. So again, that's going to create the package.json for me. I'd install Express, npm install Express, and then it will create a file for our project, which I'll typically create a server.js, but it could be called whatever. Okay, so here's my server.js, and we would import Express. So I would just do like const express equals require Express. And then we would create an app object. So I would say const app equals Express, like that. And this application object is where we would write routes. So I would sit there and just do a normal route like this. I would say like app.get, we'll say this the normal route, and we would just say res equals, and then we would do like res.send hello. Okay, and if you wanted to use like params, you would do something like param /param, and then you would be able to do something like res, and then we would do like res.json, and in this case what I'm going to do is just pass in an object of like params. We'll pass in rec.params, and we'll pass in queries in rec.query. Okay, those would be sort of like basic things we could use in our request. I can access the params, I can access the queries, and again we'll just test that all out real quick. App.listen, we get our server listening, so on some port, so we'll say 4000, and then we would pass in a callback just so that we have like a little message that tells us that the server's listening. Okay, listening on 4000, and then that's it. There's our server. So I would just do node server.js. Okay, and if I go to the browser, if I just go to the main page, okay, that's always what the slash means. Okay, if I go to localhost 4000, because again we're hosting this on 4000, I'm just gonna get the hello. Okay, so that's the res.send there. Okay, now if I put literally anything after the slash because of that param, watch what happens. Localhost / let's say cheese, and see cheese is the param because we called that param. And then I could add queries to the end of the URL. I could be like bread equals rye, and veggies equals tomato. And again, the reason I always use like ridiculous words like bread, rye, cheese is because the point is just really kind of nail in there that they're arbitrary words. Like there's no reserved word in JavaScript that is cheese, bread. Like these aren't things that are built into any of these frameworks or languages, that the names are arbitrary. Because a lot of times if I try to use too formal a name, people think like that's the word you have to use, or that's a thing that's built in. No, these are just arbitrary. Okay, but you see like anything that's part of the URL query shows up as part of the rec.query object. Anything that is part of the URL as a param, because we use the colons, shows up there. So that's great. That's like your basics of Express routing. Okay, and you can pretty much do most things with just that, far as like setting up the routes, the request. But there's a lot of cool things you can do. Okay, so that's what I want to do in this video. So if we take a look at the Express routing documentation, there's a lot of other cool stuff you can do. Okay, so probably usually most of the time when you first start using Express, you use these methods. Okay, meaning like get if you're talking about a get request, post if it's a post request, delete if it's a delete request. So it's always like app.this or router.this. But you also have app.all. Okay, so I could be like app.all, and app.all would listen to all requests at a particular URL. So if I said app.all bread, it doesn't matter if it's a get, a post, anything. It'll just listen to all requests. So I can just listen to all requests going to bread. Okay, so we'll do rec res. Okay, and again, what I will do is res.json, and we'll just pass in some things like the URL, which would be rec.url. We'll pass in headers, which will be like rec.headers. We'll pass in a body if there is one, which will be rec.body, assuming there is one. And we'll pass in rec.queries if there is any, so that'd be rec.query. So again, these request properties. Okay, so let me restart the server. So I restart the server so we can see the new route. And again, if I make a get request to, let's say, /bread, see, I'm going to get the headers, the URL, because that's what I told it to get, and see the URL is /bread, and these are the headers. So I can see like the host is localhost 4000, and this is the browser, and all sorts of kind of cool information that the headers include. And there's a cookie that's from another video I did that's just kind of still sitting there. Cool. So that's fine and good. But more interestingly, because I put all, I could use, let's say, Thunder Client here, and I'll just grab one of these and say like localhost 4000 /bread. I'm gonna get the same results whether I make a post request. So I can get the same results if it's a put request, delete request. Okay, that wouldn't be the case if I did like app.get. So that's another thing you can use. Okay, and one cool way to use that, okay, is to create like a catch-all like error handling route. So the way you would do that is usually you put it at the bottom of your routes. I would put something like app.all, and then you'd put an asterisk. An asterisk means like literally anything. Okay, anything that just doesn't, anything, okay, will match. Okay, you put it at the end so that way it checks to see if anything else was a match first. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of this route because that's gonna pretty much catch everything. But this will again catch pretty much all things that don't catch. So if you want to do your own custom like error message instead of like that cannot get this URL or cannot post this URL that you get by default from Express, you could create your own custom error messages. So I can just sit there and say like rec, you know, basically if for some reason I would just say like res.json. What I would do is I'll make an object, I'll put a message property on it, say cannot no route for this request, and then I'll include some other useful data like method rec.method, again headers rec.headers, just the same thing I kind of did before. Okay, body rec.body, queries rec.query. Okay, and again I'll start the server. Now if I do some route that doesn't exist now, if I like if I do bread/cheese, which there should be no match for, again see no route for this request. So I can creating my own sort of custom error message, like that whole cannot get thing that comes by default with requests won't be there anymore because this is going to match every route. Okay, so essentially I can use this instead if I prefer this, or I can create like a custom page or some other sort of way of notifying that hey, this URL don't work. Okay, and really honestly what I should be doing is also giving this a status of 404, status 404.json, like that. So that way I get that 404 error. Okay, well I gotta restart the server. And then actually I probably should put like is status. Would it be like res dot status? What does it, does it respond? Return anything just sets the status code. If I do status code. Okay, so this is the actual status code property. So I'd probably include that. Okay. And then I hit Control C and just rerun the server. And now when I do this, okay, and see I get the status of 404 there. So this is like an informative bit of information. I can see, okay, I'm getting a 404 message, meaning this route doesn't exist. I can see any headers just to see if there's anything interesting in there. And I can kind of see this is clear, like there's no route for this request. Again, for your at production level, you probably want to replace this with like a traditional 404 page, some sort of website. But if this is an API, well, this also may be useful. You may want something with like a lot less information once you go into production. But during development, this may be a useful way of handling 404s on your API. Okay, cool. So that's neat. You can do a catch-all route. Okay, because a lot of what you can do is you can do some basic regex in just a string. That's kind of a cool thing. So for example, you know, sometimes you have like resources and it's like, let's say /to-do. Some people may not remember if it's to-do or to-dos. So what you could do is that you could do something like this, like app.get, and then you do /to-do. That should always be there, but maybe some people forget the S. So you put a question mark S, and what that does, it makes the S optional. Okay, so people can type in to-do or to-dos, and res. And then if I do here, res.send, and just as a little marker that you got the right route, to-dos. Okay. And then again, I will close the server, return it on. And now if I go to /to-do, well, if I do to-dos, I get that. But if I type in just /to-do, oh, I still got to-do. To-dos. Yes, that makes sense. And /to-do, it doesn't. Interesting. Because technically that question mark should make it optional. So you see right here, match ACD. Oh, it's making the letter before it optional. So technically I would want to do this. That's what I want. Okay. To-dos, that would make the S optional. So let's try that again. Now if I do to-do, now to-do works. To-do works with the O and then with the S. Okay, so that's cool. That's neat. Okay, and that's really useful because especially when you have like those like blog, people always like accidentally type in blogs or they type in blog. That's a good way to kind of catch sort of both possibilities. Okay, now dots and dashes are just treated as like text. So I can do like, you know, if I want to do like to-dos dash cheese, that's fine. Like that works in the URL. So like again, if I restart the server, this has no special meaning. It's just you can use to-dos dash again cheese. I'll still get to-dos. Like I can use that just fine. No problem. Okay, the same thing with dots. But again, question marks, no. If you need to use a question mark, then it gets a little bit more complicated. We'll come back to that. Okay, let's just kind of show you some of these other. And again, same thing with periods. You can just use a period just fine. Now, if you use plus, it means you can have multiples of a character. Okay, so for example, if I did this, I did T plus. That means it could be as many T's as I want, that route. So if I do this, and now let's go back over here. I do 1 T, it's to-dos. I do 2 T's, to-dos. I can add as many T's as I want, and it'll keep treating that, it'll keep matching that route. But the minute I enter another character, oh, P, I get it doesn't match anymore. Okay, so that's what the plus means. So basically, you know, let's say the route is like good, right, you might want to just do like go plus D. Okay, the reason being that people might misspell good and they might put a third O or accidentally put one O, but you know they're trying to get to like slash good. Okay, and again, they might put goods, so you might want to put like that, and then make sure if they accidentally put too many O's or if they do or don't put an S at the end, you're covered. Okay, so you're catching the typos and sending them to the right place, assuming you don't have any other routes that might collide with that, but that's not necessarily like, I don't see a downside to that. Okay, and it's helping people catch their typos. Okay, so those are things you can do with your routes. Okay, then you have wildcards. Okay, which means like wherever the asterisk is could be anything, literally anything. So in this case, like we use the asterisk to represent just anything altogether, but you could have something like, you know, I could do something like this, like to-dos dot asterisk, which means it could be to-dos dot anything. Okay, and if I did that, okay, I could do to-dos dot cheese. And see, I get to-dos dot bread, to-dos. And the only downside with this approach is that that's not a param. Okay, so I'm not going to get that as a variable. If I did want that as a param, I could just sit there and make that a param. I could just sit there and say, hey. Okay, and then in this case, we'll just say like rec dot params dot hey. Okay, and then we restart the server. Okay, and I could be like to-dos dot bread, and it should say bread, and it does. So it's going to say whatever that is. So you could actually have multiple params in one part of the URL. I could just be like, you know, to-dos dot hey dot bread dot cheese. Okay, and I can just be like, okay, console log rec.params. Notice there's only one slash. So I'm not creating like multiple parts of this URL. So I'm saying like to-dos.bread.yellow.dog. Okay. Oh, I didn't restart the server. Control C. So let's restart the server. Let me try this again. And see, it works. Hey, bread, cheese. So you can actually have it where like there's one chunk with multiple params, not just per every slash, but like within that same slash if you use dashes or dots. Because you can be like dot another param, dash another param. That's fine. It's just going to treat wherever the colon starts until like the next character. It's not that it doesn't treat as part of the param. So like a period, a dash doesn't get treated as part of the param. Yeah, because those generally would be allowed in a variable name. So those are going to be sort of treated as sort of nope, this is where the param name ends. Okay, so that's a cool thing you can do. You can also just use regex. Okay, sometimes regex can be really annoying, but you could. Let's say I wanted to make this now. Instead of using a string, I want to say, hey, like this is, I want to match all routes that start with to-dos. Okay, to-dos, and then after to-dos, there is a number, and as many numbers as we want. Okay, so that's just going to be like to-dos, a number. And I think I have to do like /d. Why do I feel like I need to do a /d? I'm pretty sure I do need to do a /d there to make that a digit. Okay, so then technically if I did this right, if not, I'll have to go look up the digit thing again, but it should be like to-dos, and I can just do like 3 and see that's going to get me that. And I can do as many numbers as I want because that's all going to match that regex. But the minute I stick a letter in there, because that regular expression, it won't match anymore. Oh, actually, it was allowed me to put the A in there. So let me put all these in there. How about an exclamation point? Well, let me do that. Yes, it does. Oh, because wait, it's a digit. Let me go back to regex. Or anytime I need to create like a regex expression, I'm going to use regex to remember what the rules are. So just /d. Yeah, /d should be a digit. So technically that wouldn't match theoretically. Let's see what happens if I add the G at the end for global. Control C. And let's try it out. No, it still matches. Now, but again, if I do to do, right now I'm going to get that. So it still has to start with to dos. Okay, and I think there are some differences with the regex we're reading. So let's see here. Like this route path matching an A. Like this just means like basically the way this reads, like this is these are always the beginning of the regex statement, and then the dot and the $sign are always like the beginning and the end. So we're saying, okay, in the beginning, here's where it begins. So it's got to start with like literally anything, but end in fly. Okay, so there can't be anything after fly, but anything can be before fly because we have the asterisk in there. Okay, so you can do any kind of cool regex expression you want. There are some quirks with how some things in regex work for this particular purpose, but yeah. Okay, we've already done like multiple params. So again, you can have as many params as you want. Okay. So we did that already. I mean, that's, yeah, this is, okay, we already did that. So you can put dashes between params. So if you want to like double load in params and chunks of your URL. Okay. Now this will like kind of double check, like it makes sure that a param is a particular type. So you put that in the string. So if I were to do like something like this, let's say, get rid of this, turn this back into a string and say /todos/ and then I would put like ID. I want an ID, but I want to make sure it's a number. I would put like something like /d plus. Okay, and then that's going to be treated like sort of like the regex representation and be like, it has to be a number. So if I were to do like blah 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 localhost 4000 / what did I call it again? Did I say to dos or to do? To dos. Let me actually just put the question mark in front of that S after that S, so I don't have to worry about the S. Okay, and then so we'll say to dos / and let's say 45567. That did not work. Let's see why. To dos / ID. I think I did some wrong character. No, that's right. Route path. Just see the way they wrote it. Okay, to have more control over the exact string that can be matched by a route parameter, you can append a regular expression in parentheses. Okay. Because a regular expression is usually part of a literal string, be sure to escape any characters with an additional backslash. For example, //d. Part of the string. Okay, I'm trying to see why that is not doing exactly what I wanted to do, because technically that's user ID. User ID, rect.params. App.get. I'll just get rid of this question mark for now, see if that's the issue. Okay. It'd be nice if they showed us like an example of that in the code, just to make that clear. Let's see here. Okay, so we started the server, I'm pretty sure. So if I do this, 567, I'm going to assume. Now, what if I should put letters instead? No, it still doesn't match either way. So this is just not, that piece is just not working at the moment. Let me just make sure it works normally. So if I do to-do-z-id, see, now it works. Okay. Let's close this window. Okay, ID, SD, FSF. Okay, I'm gonna let that one go. Okay, route handlers. Let's see here. Was there any other? Oh yeah, and here's a couple cool things you can do with like the routes. Like if you're not aware of this already, basically you can actually have multiple functions in any of these route handlers. The only difference is that anything, like, see, this is like always going to be the last one because it's the one that sends a response, res. Okay, so that's generally always got to be the last one. But I can actually write multiple functions. So I could do another argument and just put in another function in here. Okay, rec res. The only difference is I have to add a third argument called next. And you'll see the same thing, same story with middleware. Because the idea is that this is not the last thing, so you have to tell it to kind of go to the next function. That's what the next function's for. But I could do like console.log bread and then say next. Okay, next. And basically what'll happen is that when I hit this route, this function will run first, making bread log to the console, but this next function then pushes it to this function, and this is the one that actually sends the response with the JSON. Okay, and that could actually be multiple arguments like this. You could actually pass it an array of functions. Either of those would work just fine. And so it could just be, that all is fine and good. Okay, so you can see here's an example of that. Like, see here, they're passing like an array of functions to a route. That all is well and good. I probably wouldn't do that too often. I mean, the only reason you would do that is if you have like a certain sequence of middleware that you're going to attach to a couple different routers, and instead of having to like come up with all these different pairings, you have a couple set configurations and you put them in an array and pass those variables where needed. I can't imagine that being the thing in many apps, but I can imagine an app that would need it. But yeah, let's restart the server. And then what I can do is, what was I talking about? Oh, way over here. If I go to bread, and again, I'm just going to get the response here. Bread is not defined. Reference error. How did that happen? rec.url. Oh, I put console log bread, the variable. You need to make that. Okay. And if I do this, there you go. That runs, but then I go over here and there's bread in the console. So this first function did run, then this function ran and gave us the response we see in the browser. That's cool. You could also create like global variables. Like there's this app.locals property that you can use. So I can be like app.locals equals app.locals.cheese equals Gouda. And that becomes available in pretty much in all of these. So now I could instead say like rec.app.locals.cheese and access that property. This is good, especially if you have your like all your code, all your routes broken up into like a lot of different routers. This, well, let me think about this. Yeah, I think this does trickle down to the routes. It won't trickle into multiple apps. So if you create multiple app objects, they can't reference this particular app's locals. But I think the routers who are registered with this app can. And then routes have their own local property. So I think there's like, but we'll come back to that in a second. So now let me restart the server, show this at work. Gouda is not defined. Oh, me and my strings today. Okay. So now if I refresh, oh, I gotta start the server. Node server.js. Now let's see here and see this worked fine. Let's take a look at the console and see Gouda got console logged. Again, that makes more sense when you have stuff broken up in a lot of files. So what you can do is you can define a lot of variables inside. I probably wouldn't use this. Usually I would actually prefer to create a rec.context property and create like a special piece of middleware to create like a context object where I can store any sort of like data that I want to pass around and make available to all my routes or particular routes. I think middleware just is a more obvious place to put it, but that's a thing that's there you can use. And again, also basically like there's also like a rec.locals, and it works kind of the same way, but it only lasts during that request. So like this cheese equals Gouda, that's going to exist for every request. Okay, so that's going to be in app.locals and be available. And again, because the rec and the res object both have app inside of them, which is just this app. It's kind of a weird, I'm not quite sure why that has to be there, but again, I can imagine that if you have it in multiple files, that's convenient, because then you don't have to like export and import app. You can always just do like rec.app or res.app to access that app object. But again, now we're starting to getting into like bleeding edge stuff that you may not use till you're working at a much larger scale. But let's just see, there's anything else interesting here. There's all your response methods. Ooh, yes, let's talk about that one. Okay, another cool thing you can do with routing is I can do app.route. Now what app.route does is I name the route, so we'll call this like /super, and then what I can do is I can make different requests, like be like .get, and then just pass the function here. Res, I don't have to actually pass like the URL because technically that's already there, and I can just do like res.json or res.send, and we'll say rec.method. Okay, and then I can just do this, and then this will be like post. This will be put, and this will be delete. Okay, and you can chain them all together like this, so that way you're only typing in super once, and then chaining in the routes to those methods where you need them like that. That's another way you could write your routes. I'm trying to remember what framework that kind of reminds me of, because there's different frameworks I have that I think, that's eluding me at the moment. But yeah, let's try that out. So let me restart the router. And actually I'll do this one with Thunder Client. Okay, so here's localhost 4000, and this is /super. So again, if I do the get request, it's a get request, and it's post. I get post, put, so it works for the 4 that I set up. Now if I try to do one that I didn't set up, like patch, I get a 404 error. So that's another way you could set up your routes. So you have a lot of options on how you could set up your routes. You could also use routers. I won't get into routers in this video. I have gotten deep into routers in previous Express videos, so I'll refer you to there. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, like there's a lot you can do with Express when it comes to routing, and hopefully this has shown you some new tricks that you can use in your next Express project to make your routes more robust, or try to find ways to gather information. Again, a lot of this stuff is just like fancy for the sake of fancy. Just using more parts of your URL oftentimes works just fine. But it's nice to know you have these tools available to you. So I'll see you all later. Have a great day and enjoy.